We've got Jason here, who is the director of the Irresistible Churches Network in Australia. And it's so good to have you here, Jason. I know you preached at the Rock Christian Family a few weeks back. You're someone that has been doing ministry for many years all over the world. But what you found your bread and butter is at the moment, from what you're saying, is the whole area of soul care.
That's it.
Can you just explain how you found yourself on that path?
Yeah, so I shared a little bit about this during the message that I shared at the Rock, which, by the way, John, I just had the best time and love seeing what you guys are doing in Townsville. I'm just stoked to be connected with you guys. And primarily, not just primarily, but part of the reason why is I just love hanging out on the Strand. Like, that was a great experience for me. Got to have coffee and hang out there before the service, but then, man, loved meeting all the people at the Rock. So thanks so much for the invitation. Really my journey, John, is because most of my Christian life, I've been primarily focused on external things. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago now, 2016, that focus on external things from my training, but also what I was kind of rewarded in, even in ministry and in church world, it no longer was working for me, meaning like I wasn't fulfilled in my relationship with Jesus and serving him by all the external factors I had focused on for a long period of time. So I was introduced to the concept of soul care by a guy named Lance Witt, who is still a close personal friend and mentor of mine. And Lance defined soul care as tending to the garden of your inner life. And quite frankly, John, I had spent over 40 years, tending to the forest of my outer life, is what I would refer to it, like the farm or the forest or the fields of external work. And I hadn't really paid attention to tending to the garden of my internal life or my inner life. And that, really comes down to this idea that Jesus himself talked about in John, where he says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, that's internal, then you'll bear much fruit, which is the external. And I think my focus had been all about the fruit, but not about the abiding. And so that was a real transformational experience for me. And for the last 5 years, I've really kind of made this my life's work on a personal level. But because it's been so transformational for me personally, especially those that knew me in ministry prior to 2016, they just say, Jason, there's something different. And what is that? And so it's led to maybe sharing my own experience and my own journey and the practices and things that I've found to be helpful in tending to the garden of your inner life. It's led to me sharing those with other people. So yeah, that's kind of the background of my journey on that.
Yeah. I love what you said last time, and you just highlighted it there, that the internal will reveal itself in the external. And
Absolutely.
Look, the reality is, like you said, you can get away with, for a short amount of time, almost forgetting about the internal and focusing on the external, but eventually it's all going to come out. And I think if we're focusing on the external, it's very circumstantial, isn't it? That
absolutely
it's so dependent on, everything has to be set up in a perfect way around us for us not to crash and burn. But what you're talking about goes so much deeper than circumstances. It's something that is, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of what's going on around you, if you can focus on the internal, you'll be able to get through whatever circumstances you face.
Absolutely. Like I think, John, people oftentimes this time of year, we're celebrating Christmas, we're about to celebrate New Year's and so on. Like it's a season where people begin to reflect on their past year and maybe even look ahead to their new year. And they begin to say things like, oh, I'd love to be able to lose X amount of weight, or I'd love to be able to maybe do something financially in this way. And so external circumstances can hinder you from those kinds of things. But if you're saying, no, I'm actually wanting to become a different person internally, for instance, I want to be a healthy person, whether you break your leg or not, doesn't have to stop you from being healthy. That external circumstance, you can still be healthy. The same is true when it comes to wanting to maybe be more generous. You could even lose your job in 2022 and still reach the goal of being more generous, even though an external circumstance has hindered maybe your finances. You can still be a generous person. And so I think that's the difference between the external doing and the internal being of who I'm becoming really the focus of what you're looking at.
And so as we look into 2022, into next year, and not wanting to repeat the same mistakes or the same things that maybe have gotten us to the end of this year feeling tired, feeling burnt out, feeling like we're limping to the finish line. What sort of lessons would you have? What kind of advice would you have to make sure that we don't do that?
Yeah. John, recently over the last few years have started a end of year practice where I review what I call my personal dashboard. Some people call it a life manifesto or some sort of a measuring of how they're doing. And it used to be, John, honestly, it used to be all about what I was achieving and what I was accomplishing, the external. A couple of years ago, I changed that based upon similar advice, like you just quoted Craig Rochelle, focus more on the who than the do. I feel like every pastor is trying to find some clever rhyming solution for this, because the way I say it is this: I want to focus more on who God wants me to become and less on what I think I need to get done. And so each year now, I don't set goals for actually getting things done. I set not even goals, but I set kind of markers of who I want to become or descriptions of who I want to become. And I adopted from a guy named Michael Hyatt, who's just a phenomenal leader. He broke down every person's life into 8 different arenas of life. And so I now use this kind of 8 arenas. I've actually, being an overachiever, I went ahead and added 2 more arenas of life. So I have 10, but I've taken the time to just write out and articulate at the end of my life in each one of these arenas. If somebody got up to share who had Jason become, who was Jason in this arena of life, what's the 1-sentence summary I would want them to say? So I'll give you the arenas if that's helpful, John. So marital is one of the arenas. And so if my spouse got up at the end of 2022, or even at my funeral, and this is kind of a Stephen Covey kind of concept from 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He talks about going and writing your own eulogy. If my wife got up at the end of my life or at the end of 22, what's the summary statement I would want her to say about this arena of life, marital arena of my life? And so for me, I want my wife, Kristen, to say, he was my best friend, greatest champion, and lover of my life. And so then when I think through what am I doing in that relationship throughout the year, man, it really helps to have that filter of, will this make me her best friend? Will this make me her greatest champion? Will this make me the lover of her life? So the areas for me, John, are spiritual, marital, parental, social, vocational, avocational, which is like hobbies, that type of thing. And then physical, you could call it recreational, I guess, instead of avocational. And then physical is another one, financial, emotional. And then my last one is digital. Because I literally am trying to think of the arenas of my life. And that last one, digital, is a new one that I've added because I think of our cultural moment. What if the internet got up at the end of 2022 and shared who you had become? Or at the end of your life, what if the internet got up and said, hey, this is who Jason was digitally? But I just think that exercise of kind of defining and articulating, who do I want to become in these areas of my life? Not what do I want to get done, but who do I want to become? That, to me, I've found it incredibly helpful as a reflection tool and a planning tool.
Yeah, that's so good. Because we so often get to the end of the years, don't we? And we just we make the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think you defined insanity in one of your
Yeah.
previous messages.
Yeah.
Could you just go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I've heard this so many times that insanity is just repeating the same things over and over again, expecting to get a different result. And my wife and I, we joke around when we're frustrated about something in our lives. We oftentimes say the system is perfectly designed to get the results you're getting. So if you don't like the results you're getting, you need to change the system. And the system, in a sense, when it comes to our lives, are our daily habits. Our lives are made up of habits and essentially moments and decisions that we make on a daily basis. That's the accumulation of those days and moments and decisions that are the summary of your life. And so when I think about the systems in my life or the habits in my life, I oftentimes think of this guy named Charles Duhigg. He wrote this amazing book called The Power of Habit. And he talks about these habits that are actually foundational habits that then trickle into other areas of your life. So for example, working out is one of these habits where after you work out, I've found this to be true. I tend to want to eat better for the rest of the day. Immediately after a workout, I don't think I'm going to go to McDonald's and grab a sausage McMuffin or something like that. I think, you know what, where's the closest smoothie place where I can get one of those green smoothies? And so it's one of these foundational habits that then trickle into other areas of your life. And I think that that's really what has been helpful for me, is finding some keystone habits, as Duhigg would describe them, keystone habits that then create other habits in my life that help me become who I feel like God wants me to become, not just get done what I think I need to get done. So that's been really helpful. Keystone habits have been a huge help to me. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just looking at the life of Jesus, right? I mean, there's probably no better person we could model how to have the best year ever after than
Absolutely.
him. And I know that you've just done extensive research into not just what he taught, but how he seemed to live and how he carried himself and what his day-to-day looked like. And one of those key things that you said was he always found silence and solitude.
Absolutely.
He found silence and solitude. And what does that look like for us in 2022 when the world seems to be going faster than ever? And some of us might be feeling like we're just out of breath trying to keep up. Following the example of Jesus, what does that look like?
Totally. I think, John, the way I discovered some of these habits is that I actually read a quote. I think it was Dallas Willard that one time said, if you want to live the lessons that Jesus taught, you have to adopt the lifestyle that Jesus lived. So if I want to live out the lessons that Jesus taught, like love your neighbor as yourself, part of my lifestyle needs to be slowing down or spending time in silence and solitude so I can be in a position to actually love my neighbor. But the speed at which we live our lives these days, John, is so much faster than what Jesus lived his life. Like, even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you can read the story of Jesus' life. There are actually 4 different accounts of it, which is fantastic. We get 4 different perspectives on how Jesus lived his life from 4 different individuals. And Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, all 4 of these guys who wrote these biographies of his life, they all share some of the same keystone habits that Jesus lived. And I think that when we adopt those habits, when we adopt that lifestyle, it actually makes it possible for us to live out the lessons that he taught. So silence and solitude, if you read through the Gospels, you'll actually find that Jesus was not like a monk who set himself aside for his whole life up in a tower somewhere, just praying to the Father. You see this rhythm. Jesus is constantly busy doing the work of the Father, but then pulling himself away sometimes from the work to just be with his Father. And silence and solitude was a major part of what it looked like for him to be with his Father. And so when I look at that and I think to myself, well, how would Jesus live if he was in 2022? What would that look like? I think that would look a lot like busy serving Jesus by helping those that are vulnerable, maybe doing breakfast club at the local school, or maybe it's serving at your church on a Sunday, but then finding times throughout the week, finding times every day to pull away from that activity to just be with the Father and in that silence and solitude. So for me personally, John, that actually looks like I have a rhythm of 4 different times each day that I pull away, not for huge amounts of time. The morning and the evening are a little bit longer, but middle of the morning and middle of the afternoon are more like 15 minutes. But during that 15 minutes, I just sit part of that time and I just focus on God's love for me, and just in silence and solitude, trying to listen to the voice of Jesus and what he wants to say to me in that moment. So what I've found to be true though, John, is this. I remember when I first started doing this, I would set a little timer for maybe 2 minutes of silence and solitude. And after about 20, 23 seconds or so, I'd look down and it would be like, oh, I've still got a minute and a half left. So it took me a while to kind of adjust to this. But I found really helpful was picking a word or a phrase that when my mind started to wander, I would just refocus my attention back by a word or a phrase, oftentimes a word like surrender, or I would use the word Jesus, or maybe a phrase like be still, or be still and know that I am God, just to recenter my attention. And this is the beautiful thing about this, John. I always feel a little bit of shame and guilt that my mind has wandered. But every time I recenter my attention back on Jesus, it's almost as if he reminds me that he's like the best friend who, it doesn't matter how much time has passed, they're just thrilled that you connected with them. And I just want to encourage people that are maybe considering this silence and solitude thing. Man, don't feel shame, don't feel guilt. Every time your mind wanders, and it will, and you come back to the Father, he's so thrilled that your attention is on him. He's just so in love with you and so grateful to have that time with you. So yeah, silence and solitude has been a super helpful keystone habit for me personally.
I think for myself, I know that silence and solitude probably isn't going to come on accident, right? It's not going to happen organically for me. It's probably something that I need to put into my calendar, put in my schedule, just to make sure that that actually happens. And you know, that might sound silly, but I think Jesus was, obviously he didn't have an iPhone, but he's such a busy guy, and people just always around him, that he had to find times that he said, I just gotta pull back. I gotta spend time with the Father. And I think that's just something that, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, silence and solitude can totally revolutionize what your year looks like.
John, I love that you mentioned that whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, mindfulness is really what we're talking about, kind of from a secular psychology or counseling world. And people are talking about and have been talking about the incredible benefits of mindfulness now for many, many years.
Yeah.
What they may or may not realize is that this is actually a Christian practice that Jesus began this practice when he was here, spending time with the Father in silence and solitude. And then those great kind of fathers of the faith in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th century, they practiced this as well. So this is, if you're a follower of Jesus, this is a tradition that has been practiced for centuries. If you're not a follower of Jesus, there is a lot of science today and a lot of scholars that would say this is beneficial no matter where you are in your journey of faith. So I would encourage people to begin maybe testing or kind of piloting what it would have looked like to practice this in their day.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And Jason, here I've got my iPhone here.
Yeah.
I've got my iPad here. I've got another, I'm on my computer right now. I've got my screen here. I've got a TV over there. My kids are at daycare. I'm at work, but I'll pick up my kids at about 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I'll pick them up at 4 o'clock. We'll have time together as a family, pretty intentional time until about 7 when they go to sleep. And then my habit is probably to maybe do a little bit more work, still be on my phone, be on the iPad. I mean, our days are just jam-packed for me, it's about 4 a.m. with my kids waking up, but from
Yes.
4
Yes.
a.m. till 9 p.m. And
Yeah.
to be honest, the last thing that I probably see before I go to bed is
Is a
this,
screen. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What does it look like for us in 2022 to just slow down, right? To slow down without, maybe we feel the pressures of our jobs, or we feel all this pressure. How do we not drop the ball in what we're doing, but still slow down?
Yeah. I've found that, John, this is quite frankly one of the hardest things for me, because primarily I think the real reason for why it's hard for me to slow down is that I'm not okay with the God-given limits that I have in my life, of the amount of time I have in a day, the amount of work that I can accomplish, that kind of thing. And that is tied to, I probably am not completely content with my identity just being rooted in who I am in Jesus, not what I get done in a day. So for me, if I were to kind of backtrack on why am I so busy, I don't like my limits. And it's because my limits require me to just face the reality. My identity is in Jesus, not in what I get done or what I accomplish. So I oftentimes am trying to find my identity in other things, which is why I get busy, because I'm just packing my schedule in a way that seems like I'm limitless. So practically, what does that look like, John? I think it practically means I have to schedule less in my day so that I can slow down and be more present and walk at a pace. I love the quote of Mike Todd. He's the pastor at Transformation Church in the States, in Oklahoma. He says that we've got to walk at a pace of grace. Jesus walked at a pace of grace. In fact, if you go back and read those biographies we were talking about before, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, any one of those, I don't know that, I can't recall ever reading that Jesus ran anywhere. He walked everywhere he went. And it wasn't just because that was the mode of transportation in the day. There was chariots, there was horseback, there was a whole bunch of things. But you'll notice that Jesus just walked. He lived at a pace of grace constantly. One of the stories that I find incredibly fascinating is the story of a guy named Jairus, who had a daughter that was not well. And he came to Jesus and he asked Jesus if he could come and heal his daughter. And instead of leaving immediately, Jesus actually took his time getting there. But on his way there, the daughter passed away. In fact, on his way there, he healed another woman while he was there. And people were asking questions about that. And then he finally gets to the place where this guy's daughter is at, and she's already passed away. And they were devastated that Jesus had taken so much time to get there. But on his way, Jesus was able to take care of the need of a person as he was traveling, because he wasn't in a hurry. And then come to find out, Jesus is actually still able to heal this guy's daughter, Jairus's daughter. And so it just is a great example, again, of if we're going to live out the lessons that Jesus taught, we have to adopt some of the lifestyle that he lived. So on a practical level for me, John, it means actually scheduling less in my day, which for an achiever and somebody that gets their identity from accomplishing things and getting things done, man, that is just hard work. But it's a great reminder that my identity is in Jesus, not in the tasks that I get done each day. And then that allows me to live at a slower pace, where I have margin between meetings, where I can take a phone call from somebody that needs to have a conversation with me, or I can, in the lane at the grocery store, pick the slow lane and actually talk to some other people in my community, rather than trying to find the shortest, fastest lane to check out and get home. So practically speaking for me, recognizing my limits, scheduling less into my days, and not getting my identity from what I get done, but rather from who I am in Jesus. It's been a game changer for me. Game changer.
Yeah. Because we do get so caught up just in our day-to-day and our identity in the things that we get done. Often in the Western culture, I know, someone says, how's your day or how's your week? Oh, busy. That's just whether you're busy or not, that's just what you want people to think. And
yes.
And what does it look like for us to change that culture and change that mindset of what a successful person looks like? It doesn't have to be just the amount you achieve in a 24-hour time. In fact, I would say that if you're focusing on the inner garden of your life, in the grand scheme of a year, you're going to create more quality and quantity of work than if you were just focusing on getting stuff done. Sometimes we just get stuff done for the sake of getting stuff done.
Yeah. And it's what's rewarded in our culture.
Yeah.
So in the workplace or in the school setting, whatever setting you're in society, we reward people that are efficient, effective, and get things done, even if we don't like who that person has become. We still reward them, even if they're not pleasant to be around. You've been in that work scenario where it's like, oh, they're kind of a tough person on the team, but man, they get a lot done.
Yeah.
So we reward that. And I just think long term, I think back on my life, what do I want to be known for? Who do I want to become? I think is far more important than what I've gotten done.
Yeah. And just to recap for those who are looking into next year, who are watching this, who don't want to continue to just be in that vicious cycle, it's time that we start focusing on the inner garden of our life and changing the way we view what a successful year looks like. It's not about the things we're going to get done. It's about who we're going to become. And as we're sort of on that journey of figuring out who we want to be at the end of the year, and how we get to the end of the year and being content with where we're at, silence and solitude, scheduling some time in your calendar to be able to, if you're a church person and you're a follower of Jesus, finding time in your calendar, prioritizing time in your calendar, just be spending that quality time with him. Maybe to start with, like you said, maybe it's just 5 minutes a day to start with. It doesn't, don't need to put pressure on to do an hour of prayer straight, right? I know I can't, I can't do that. I struggle to sit still for an hour.
And John, on that point of prayer, I just want to encourage those that are listening. I know for me, I've oftentimes been told, prayer is so relational. I've been asking the question lately, why is it then that when it comes to prayer, I was taught to do all the talking? Like, I think if it's so relational, there's got to be some talking and there's got to be some listening. So I want to encourage you, if you're a person that's maybe starting out with this whole concept of silence and solitude, make it a part of your prayer time to just pause and be quiet and just to listen, and then maybe bring your requests before God or those things that you want to pray with him about. So that can be a part of your prayer time each day for sure. And
I know my one thing my dad taught me this as well, but my grandpa taught me this, was to never let the car tank get to empty, to get on the light on, to make sure there's like a quarter tank there and then fill it up. And I think for us, like, we don't want to get to the end of our days, our weeks, our months, our years on empty. And a way for us to refuel ourselves is to find that silence and solitude. And to spend time with the one that will refill our fuel tanks. And then it's just so important for us to slow down, like you were saying, isn't it? To walk at that pace of grace, to focus on the person that's in front of us.
John, I was thinking about that person that maybe is listening and watching, and they aren't a follower of Jesus yet. I would encourage you, and Jesus, even if you're not a follower of Jesus yet, Jesus has some incredible life lessons that we can learn from him. And maybe your first step to exploring what does it even mean to follow Jesus, is to just perhaps read one of the biographies of his life, whether it's Matthew or Mark or John, Luke, whatever. Luke is oftentimes a popular one at this time of year because it's got the great kind of description of the Christmas story. Mark is the shortest one. So if you're looking for a quick read, go with Mark. That's a quick one. I believe there's 21 chapters. So you could do that even the first 21 days of the new year, maybe read a chapter a day. But perhaps maybe the first step for you, before you even say, hey, I want to become a follower of Jesus, just explore the life that he lived and read one of his biographies and learn some of these lessons that we're talking about today. I think that's a great New Year's resolution, to say, hey, I want to explore this guy, Jesus, and at least read his biography and see what I can learn from him as a first step to exploring it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great encouragement. And as we wrap this time up, do you have, I'm just going to put you on the spot, one final piece of advice for us looking into 2022?
I do think that if you're thinking about who you want to become, and you think about, maybe it's not those 10 arenas of life that's very much the overachiever type of thing coming out in me. Maybe you're like, you know what, I want to pick 2 or 3 areas of my life this year. Maybe it's my finances, maybe it's my marriage. Instead of thinking about what I want to get done, think about who I want to become. I would encourage anyone that's doing that, John, to actually write down who they want to become and review that regularly. I review it each morning. But even if you just reviewed it once a week or once a month, to write down those 3 or 4 areas of your life and decide, who do I want to become? Not what do I want to get done by the end of the year, and then review that regularly. I think that'd be a great habit to get into.
Yeah, that's great. And just to take it one step further, we have a value at the Rock Christian family to say that we are better together. And maybe this is a church word, but accountability. And so finding somebody that you trust, that you know has the best intention for your life, and maybe sharing those 3 or 4 to say, hey, you said you're going to do this. How are you doing? Are you becoming this person? Or, hey, I recognize that you said you want to be like this, but you're starting to go back into bad habits. So love that. I think accountability is really important. And thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Oh, my pleasure, mate. Love it.
Yeah. And we look forward to hearing from you again in the future.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time, John. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for letting me be with you guys.